There is nothing between your hand and this screen. Look at the space in front of you, the gap between your eyes and these words. You see nothing. Air maybe, emptiness. Transparent void with no substance, no structure, no meaning. You are wrong. That space is not empty. That nothing is not nothing. Every cubic centimeter of what you call empty space contains more energy than all the stars in the observable universe combined. Every point of apparent void is seething with activity. Particles appearing from nowhere, existing for fractions of a second, then vanishing back into nothing. Not metaphor, not poetry. Literal physical reality confirmed by experiment, measured in laboratories, verified by the most precise theory in the history of science. Quantum mechanics says nothing does not exist, has never existed, cannot exist. The vacuum, the absolute emptiest state physically possible, is full, overflowing, teeming with creation at every point, at every moment. And this creation, this ceaseless emergence of something from nothing, is not random, not accidental, not meaningless. It follows precise mathematical laws. It obeys exact symmetries. It produces real, measurable effects that hold atoms together, that number, prevent matter from collapsing, that make your existence physically possible. Without creation from nothing, you could not exist. Your atoms could not hold together. Chemistry would fail. Matter would collapse. The universe would be sterile, void forever. But it is not sterile. It creates. Endlessly, automatically, without pause, without rest, without any input from outside. The vacuum creates. Nothing creates. And what it creates is everything. This is not theology. This is not philosophy. This is quantum field theory. The most successful scientific theory ever constructed, accurate to 12 decimal places, confirmed by thousands of experiments across decades, and it says something that sounds like it belongs in scripture rather than in physics textbooks. Creation from nothing is real, is happening now, has always happened, will always happen. The void is not void, emptiness is an illusion. And the mechanism by which nothing becomes something is so elegant, so precise, so inexplicable at its deepest level that it forces a question physics alone cannot answer. Why does nothing create? Why is the vacuum not silent? Why does emptiness overflow with existence rather than remaining empty? These are not idle questions. These are the deepest questions humans can ask. And quantum mechanics brings us closer to them than any previous theory in the history of thought, closer than philosophy, closer than theology, closer than mysticism. Because quantum mechanics does not merely assert that creation from nothing occurs, it describes exactly how, measures exactly how much, predicts exactly what emerges, and when, and where, and with what. Probability. This is creation with equations. Genesis with mathematics. And the mathematics works. Picture what empty space actually looks like at the quantum level. Not the smooth, featureless void you imagine. Not the blank canvas of classical physics where nothing means nothing. Instead, picture a roiling ocean, surface calm from far away but up close, churning with waves. Waves that appear from nowhere, peak for an instant, then disappear. Except these are not water waves. They are particles. Electron-positron pairs materializing from vacuum, existing for 10 to the negative 21 seconds, then annihilating each other, vanishing back into the void they emerge from. Photons appearing, propagating a distance shorter than an atom's width, then disappearing. Quarks and antiquarks flickering into existence, bound momentarily by strong force, then gone. This is the quantum vacuum. This is what nothing actually is. Not emptiness, but the most active, most creative, most energetic state in all of physics. And it never stops. Right now, in the space between the atoms of your body, virtual particles are appearing and disappearing at rates that stagger comprehension. trillions per cubic centimeter per second, each one borrowing energy from the vacuum existing, briefly then returning the energy, like a bank that lends money for fractions of a second. The loan is real, the money exists, it does things, but it returns so quickly that the books always balance, almost always. This is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle applied to energy and time. Delta E times delta T is greater than or equal to h bar over 2. The uncertainty in energy multiplied by the uncertainty in time must exceed Planck's constant divided by 2. This means for very short times energy can fluctuate enormously. The vacuum can borrow enormous energy, create particles with that energy, as long as the particles disappear quickly enough. Shorter time, larger energy fluctuation. Longer time, smaller fluctuation. The math is exact, the prediction is precise, and the consequence is staggering. Empty space is not empty, cannot be empty. The uncertainty principle forbids perfect emptiness, forbids true nothing. Because true nothing would mean zero energy for infinite time, zero uncertainty. And zero uncertainty violates quantum mechanics, violates the fundamental structure of reality. Nothing is impossible. Literally impossible. The laws of physics prohibit the existence of nothing. Think about what this means. The universe does not permit emptiness. Reality forbids void. The most fundamental theory we have about how nature works says that wherever space exists, creation must follow. Not can follow, must follow. It is not optional, not contingent, not dependent on circumstances. It is law. As absolute as the speed of light, as gravity as the conservation of energy. Creation from nothing is not miracle. It is physics. It is what space does automatically, inevitably, ceaselessly. And it has been doing it since the first moment space existed, since the Big Bang, since the beginning of time. Every point in space has been creating since it came into existence. Never pausing, never failing, never requiring instruction or permission or cause, just creating. Because that is what quantum vacuum does. That is what nothing does when nothing is governed by quantum mechanics. The experimental confirmation is overwhelming. The most famous evidence is the Casimir effect, predicted by Hendrik Casimir in 1948, confirmed experimentally by Steve Lamoureux in 1997. Take two metal plates, flat perfectly conducting parallel separated by tiny gap few micrometers. Place them in vacuum, remove all particles, all radiation, all everything. Make the space between them as empty as physically possible. Classical physics predicts nothing happens. Two plates in empty space. No force between them, no reason for anything to occur, but quantum mechanics predicts something remarkable. The plates attract each other. A measurable force pushes them together. Not gravity. Not electrostatic attraction. Not any classical force. The force comes from the vacuum itself, from nothing. Here is why. Virtual particles exist everywhere in the vacuum. They have wavelengths. Between the plates only certain wavelengths fit, like standing waves on a guitar string. Only specific frequencies resonate. Outside the plates, all wavelengths exist. So there are more virtual particles outside the plates than between them. The imbalance creates pressure. More quantum activity pushing from outside than from inside. The plates are pushed together by the creative activity of the vacuum, by nothing creating something and that something exerting measurable force. This is real. This has been measured. The predicted force and the measured force agree to within 1%. Nothing is pushing metal plates together. Empty space is exerting force on matter. The void has physical effects on the physical world. This should disturb you, not because it is wrong, because it is right, because it means the foundation of physical reality is not matter, not energy, not particles, but the creative vacuum. The seething nothing that produces everything. Matter sits on top of vacuum. Energy emerges from vacuum. Particles are excitations of vacuum. Everything you see, everything you touch, everything you are, is vacuum doing something rather than nothing. But the vacuum is already doing something, is always doing something, was never doing nothing. There has never been a moment since the beginning of the universe when the vacuum was truly empty, truly silent, truly void. The quantum vacuum creates because it must, because the laws governing it require creation, because uncertainty demands fluctuation, because the mathematics of quantum field theory necessitate that every point in space at every moment produce virtual particles that briefly exist, then return to the void. Some of these virtual particles do not return. Some become real. Under the right conditions, virtual particles can be promoted to real particles, permanent existence borrowed from the vacuum and never returned. This happens near black holes. Stephen Hawking predicted in 1974 that black holes radiate, not because anything escapes from inside the black hole, but because virtual particles created near the event horizon get separated. One falls in, the other escapes. The escaping particle is real. It carries energy away from the black hole. The black hole loses mass, eventually evaporates, disappears, destroyed by creation from nothing. Virtual particles created by the vacuum near the horizon, stealing energy from the black hole, converting vacuum fluctuation into real radiation. This is Hawking radiation, predicted theoretically. Not yet directly observed because the effect is incredibly faint for astronomical black holes. But the theoretical framework is solid, built on quantum field theory in curved spacetime, confirmed indirectly through related phenomena. And it demonstrates something profound. The vacuum can create permanently, can produce real lasting particles from nothing. Not just temporary fluctuations, but genuine creation. The vacuum is not just active. It is generative. It brings things into permanent existence from non-existence. And under extreme conditions near black holes in the early universe during cosmic inflation, this generative power becomes enormous. The vacuum can create entire universes worth of matter. During cosmic inflation, the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang, the universe expanded exponentially. Space itself stretched at rates exceeding the speed of light. And during this stretching, quantum vacuum fluctuations were amplified. Tiny fluctuations in the vacuum, microscopic variations in the density of virtual particles were stretched to cosmic scales. These fluctuations became the seeds of all structure in the universe. Every galaxy, every star, every planet traces its origin to a quantum fluctuation in the vacuum. A virtual particle that appeared from nothing was stretched by inflation, became a tiny density variation that over billions of years, through gravitational attraction, grew into clusters of galaxies containing trillions of stars. You exist because 13.8 billion years ago the vacuum fluctuated. Nothing trembled. And that trembling, amplified by inflation, sculpted by gravity, became everything. This is scientific consensus. Not speculation, not hypothesis. The cosmic microwave background radiation carries the fingerprint of these primordial vacuum fluctuations. The pattern of tiny temperature variations across the sky, measured by satellites COBE, WMAP, Planck, matches the predictions of inflationary theory with extraordinary precision. The vacuum created the seeds of cosmic structure. Nothing produced the blueprint for everything. And this raises the question that haunts physics, the question that separates science from theology, the question that every honest physicist must eventually confront. Why does the vacuum create? Why is nothing so productive? Why do the laws of physics require creation from emptiness rather than permitting true void? Why does the uncertainty principle exist? Why does quantum mechanics work this way rather than some other way? Physics can describe the vacuum fluctuations with incredible precision, can calculate their properties, predict their effects, verify predictions experimentally, but physics cannot explain why these laws exist, cannot explain why the vacuum has the properties it has. cannot explain why nothing is so extraordinarily full of creative potential. The description is complete, the explanation is absent. This is where theology enters, not as competitor to physics, not as alternative explanation of mechanism, but as response to a question physics cannot ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? Leibniz asked this in 1714, called it the fundamental question of metaphysics. 3 centuries later, physics has made the question more urgent, not less. Because physics has shown that nothing is not simple. Nothing is not the default state. Nothing is not what you get when you remove everything. Nothing in quantum mechanics is the most complex, most active, most creative state possible. It requires explanation more than something does. A universe full of matter makes sense intuitively. Matter exists, fine. But a vacuum that creates matter from non-existence, that produces something from nothing, that generates reality from void. This demands explanation. This screams for explanation. Some physicists say no explanation is needed. The vacuum is what it is. The laws are what they are. Quantum mechanics works. Why? Ask why. Shut up and calculate. This is pragmatic, perhaps wise, but not satisfying. Not to the mind that asks why. Not to the consciousness that wonders why it exists at all. Not to the being made of vacuum fluctuations contemplating the vacuum that made it. The question persists. Why does nothing create? And the answers offered by physics are either circular, the laws require it, or infinite regress. The laws emerge from deeper laws, which emerge from deeper laws, or brute fact. It just does. None of these is explanation. They are descriptions of the limit of explanation. They mark the boundary where physics ends, and beyond that boundary the question remains, louder than ever. Theology has always claimed that creation from nothing is divine act. Creatio ex nihilo. God creates the universe from nothing. Not from pre-existing matter, not from chaos, not from some prior substance, but from absolute nothing. This is foundational doctrine in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Creation from nothing by divine command. Theology claims this is supernatural act, beyond physics, beyond nature. God, as cause of nature itself, not subject to natural laws, but source of natural laws. This was always assertion of faith, not of evidence, until quantum mechanics showed that creation from nothing actually occurs, that the vacuum actually produces particles from non-existence, that nothing actually generates something through precise mathematical process. Now, creation from nothing is not just theological claim, it is physical fact. And the question becomes whether these are the same thing, whether the quantum vacuum creating particles is the same creation theology describes, whether physics has discovered the mechanism of divine creation, or whether physics has replaced divine creation with natural process, whether the vacuum's creative power eliminates the need for God or reveals how God creates. The parallel is striking. Theology says God creates from nothing, continuously sustains creation, moment by moment, is omnipresent, and the source of all that exists. Quantum field theory says the vacuum creates from nothing, continuously sustains particles moment by moment, is omnipresent, the field exists everywhere, and is the source of all matter and energy. The structural similarity is precise. Omnipresent, creative power, continuously generating reality from non-existence. Whether you call it God or vacuum, the description is functionally identical. This does not prove they are the same. Functional similarity is not identity. A river and a highway both carry things from one place to another. That does not make them the same thing. But the parallel is too precise to ignore, too exact to dismiss, too suggestive to leave unexplored. Consider the vacuum expectation value. In quantum field theory, every field has a vacuum state, the lowest energy configuration. For most fields, this is zero. No particles, no activity, nothing. But some fields have non-zero vacuum expectation values. The Higgs field, as we discussed in previous videos, has vacuum expectation value of 246 GeV. This means, even in its ground state, even when no Higgs particles exist, the field has non-zero value throughout all space. It is on, always, everywhere, creating mass for particles that interact with it. The vacuum is not empty. It is full of field value, full of creative potential, full of the thing that makes matter possible. And the Higgs field is not the only one. The quantum chromodynamic vacuum, the state related to the strong force, is even stranger. It contains what physicists call a quark condensate and a gluon condensate, pairs of quarks and antiquarks existing in the vacuum not as particles but as a condensate, a quantum fog filling all space. This condensate has energy, enormous energy, and it contributes to the mass of protons and neutrons far more than the Higgs mechanism does. Approximately 99% of the mass of ordinary matter comes not from Higgs, but from vacuum energy, from the quantum condensate, from nothing being full rather than empty. Your mass, your weight, your physical substance is 99% vacuum energy. You are made almost entirely of nothing. Of the creative vacuum organizing itself into patterns that persist, that think, that wonder about their own existence. You are the vacuum contemplating itself. Nothing becomes something, becomes someone, asking why nothing creates. This is not poetry. This is measured fact. The proton mass is 938 MeV. The quark masses from Higgs mechanism contribute about 9 MeV. The remaining 929 MeV comes from binding energy from quantum chromodynamic vacuum effects from the strong force condensate. From nothing. Your body, which contains approximately 10 to the 28th protons, is overwhelmingly composed of vacuum energy, organized by quantum chromodynamics into stable structures. You are structured nothing, organized void. The vacuum's creative output given form and persistence and consciousness. And the vacuum never stops. Every moment the quantum fields fluctuate, virtual particles appear and disappear. The condensates maintain themselves. The vacuum expectation values persist. Creation continues. Your existence is not past event, not historical fact. You are being created now, right now. The vacuum that constitutes 99% of your mass is active at this instant, generating the energy that gives your protons their mass, that gives your atoms their weight, that gives your body its substance. Remove the vacuum's creative activity and you vanish. Not slowly, instantly, because you were never truly solid, never truly substantial, never truly something independent of the nothing that made you. You are the vacuum's dream, its fluctuation given form, its creation sustained. This sounds like mysticism. But every statement can be verified experimentally. Every claim has mathematical backing. Every assertion is consequence of quantum chromodynamics, the theory of the strong force confirmed by decades of experiment at CERN, at Fermilab, at SLAC, at accelerator laboratories worldwide. The vacuum creates. You are what it creates. These are facts, not interpretation, not philosophy. Facts. And they lead to a question that is not fact but genuine mystery. If the vacuum creates everything, if nothing is the source of all substance, if emptiness generates reality, then what is the vacuum? What is this nothing that does everything? Is it foundation? Is it God? Is it mechanism without meaning? Is it accident? Is it the deepest level of reality below which nothing deeper exists? Or is it surface manifestation of something even more fundamental, even more creative, even more mysterious? Physics does not know, cannot know with current theory. The vacuum is the floor of physics, the ground state, the lowest level. You cannot dig beneath it with the tools of quantum field theory. And what lies beneath, if anything, is not physics but metaphysics, not science but philosophy, not experiment but contemplation, and perhaps theology. Perhaps the thing that lies beneath the creative vacuum, the source of its creative power, the reason nothing generates something, is what theology has always called God. Or perhaps not. Perhaps the vacuum is ultimate. Perhaps nothing is the deepest truth. Perhaps creation requires no creator. Perhaps the laws simply are, and the vacuum simply does, and existence simply happens, and there is no why, only how, only equations. Only the endlessly creative void producing reality from non-existence for no reason at all. We do not know, but the question has never been sharper, never been more precisely formulated, never been backed by more experimental evidence. The vacuum creates. This is proven. Why it creates remains the deepest question in all of human thought. And the answer, if it exists, lies somewhere between physics and theology, between mechanism and meaning, between the quantum field equations that describe creation from nothing and the ancient intuition that creation requires a creator. Somewhere in that gap between science and faith, between how and why, between equation and meaning, the answer waits. And understanding the quantum vacuum brings us closer to that answer than anything else in the history of human knowledge. But before we go deeper, we must confront something uncomfortable. Something physicists rarely discuss publicly because it embarrasses them. The worst prediction in the history of science. The cosmological constant problem. It begins simply. If the vacuum creates, if virtual particles constantly appear and disappear, if the quantum fields have non-zero vacuum expectation values, then the vacuum has energy, total energy. The sum of all fluctuations, all virtual particles, all condensates, all field values. This vacuum energy should have gravitational effect. Energy curves space-time. Einstein showed this. E equals mc squared means energy and mass are equivalent, and mass creates gravity. So vacuum energy should create gravity, should curve space-time, should affect the expansion of the universe. Physicists calculated how much, added up the contributions from all quantum fields, all virtual particles, all known physics. The answer was catastrophic. The predicted vacuum energy density is approximately 10 to the 113 joules per cubic meter. The observed vacuum energy density measured through the acceleration of the universe's expansion is approximately 10 to the negative 10 joules per cubic meter. The prediction is wrong by a factor of 10 to the 123, 1 followed by 123 zeros. This is not small error. This is not approximate disagreement. This is the largest discrepancy between theory and experiment in the history of physics. By incomprehensible margin, if the predicted value were correct, the universe would have torn itself apart in the first fraction of a second after the Big Bang. Space would have expanded so violently that no structures could form, no atoms, no stars, no galaxies, no life, nothing but exponentially expanding void forever. The universe exists only because the actual vacuum energy is almost exactly zero. Almost, but not quite. The tiny residual 10 to the negative 10 drives the observed acceleration of cosmic expansion, dark energy, the mysterious force pushing galaxies apart faster and faster. But why is the vacuum energy so small? Why is it not 10 to the 123 times larger as physics predicts? This is the cosmological constant problem, unsolved. Perhaps the deepest unsolved problem in fundamental physics. Some physicists invoke cancellation. Perhaps different contributions to vacuum energy cancel each other. Positive contributions from some fields, negative from others, adding to nearly zero. But this requires cancellation to 123 decimal places. Fine-tuning of inconceivable precision. like balancing a pencil on its point to accuracy far beyond anything meaningful. No known mechanism produces such cancellation. No symmetry explains it. No principle demands it. It just is. The vacuum energy is almost zero and nobody knows why. This is where the question of God becomes unavoidable. Not because God is the answer, but because the question demands some answer, and physics has none. Why is the vacuum energy so precisely tuned? Why is the creative power of nothing so carefully calibrated? Too much vacuum energy and the universe explodes. Too little, and the universe has no dark energy, no acceleration, no observed cosmological constant. The actual value permits galaxies, permits stars, permits planets, permits life, permits consciousness, permits beings, asking why the value is what it is. Is this coincidence? Is this accident? Is this anthropic selection in a multiverse, where every value occurs somewhere, and we observe this value because only this value permits observers? Or is this design, is this intention? Is this evidence that something set the vacuum energy to the precise value compatible with existence? Not 10 to the 123, not 0, but 10 to the negative 10, exactly the value that allows a universe of structure and complexity and life and mind. The fine-tuning argument is controversial. Scientists resist it because design is not testable, not falsifiable, not scientific. But the fine-tuning is real. The cancellation is real. The precision is real. And the absence of explanation is real. Physics describes what the vacuum energy is, but cannot explain why it has the value it has. The gap between description and explanation is where the deepest questions live. The vacuum creates. This is fact. The vacuum energy is fine-tuned to permit existence. This is observation. Why the vacuum creates and why the energy is tuned are mysteries. Genuine, deep, irreducible mysteries that current science cannot resolve. And they sit at the exact intersection of physics and theology, at the precise boundary between mechanism and meaning, between how the vacuum works and why it works this way, between the equations that describe creation from nothing and the question of whether creation requires a creator. Some say the question is meaningless, that why has no place in physics, that the universe simply is, and asking why is category error. This is defensible position, honest position, but it is also position that accepts ignorance as permanent, that refuses to pursue the deepest questions because they are hard, and history shows that questions physicists dismissed often became the most important questions of all. Why do objects fall was not a serious question until Newton made it one. Why does light have constant speed was philosophical nonsense until Einstein showed it, revealed the structure of space-time. Why does the vacuum create might be meaningless, or it might be the most important question physics will ever face. We do not know yet, but we will not know if we do not ask. And there is something else. Something that makes the vacuum even more mysterious. The vacuum is not unique. Quantum field theory suggests our vacuum might not be the only possible vacuum, might not be the lowest energy state, might be what physicists call a false vacuum, a local minimum, a valley that looks like the bottom but is not. The true vacuum might lie deeper, and if so, our vacuum could decay, could quantum tunnel into the true vacuum, could undergo phase transition, like the electroweak symmetry breaking that gave particles mass. But this time the transition would change everything. New vacuum, new laws, new physics, every atom in the universe destroyed and rebuilt according to different rules. This is vacuum decay, theoretical possibility, perhaps the most terrifying idea in all of physics. The ground beneath reality might not be solid. The nothing that creates everything might itself be temporary, unstable, waiting to collapse into a deeper nothing with different creative properties or no creative properties at all. Current calculations suggest our vacuum is probably stable. Probably. The measurements of Higgs boson mass and top quark mass place us in the stable region, but uncertainties remain. We might be metastable. The vacuum that sustains us might be borrowed time. Nothing creating everything on borrowed time. This is the deepest vertigo physics offers, not just that you are made of nothing, but that the nothing you are made of might itself be temporary, might itself be fluctuation in some deeper emptiness, might itself be creation from an even more fundamental void. This is where we go next, deeper into the vacuum, into the zero-point energy that fills empty space, into the relationship between quantum creation and theological creation, into the question of whether nothing is truly the foundation, or whether beneath nothing lies something even more fundamental, something that explains why nothing creates, something that might be the reason the void is not void, the reason emptiness overflows, the reason nothing does everything. There is energy in nothing, not metaphorical energy, not spiritual energy, not philosophical energy, real, measurable, calculable energy, energy that physicists can quantify to extraordinary precision, energy that affects matter, that curves space-time, that determines the fate of the universe, the energy of empty space, the energy of the vacuum, zero-point energy. The name is misleading. Zero-point suggests zero energy. It does not mean that. It means the energy at the zero point, the ground state, the lowest possible level, the bottom. And the bottom is not zero. The bottom is enormous. Consider a simple quantum system, a single harmonic oscillator, a particle in a potential well bouncing back and forth like a ball in a bowl. Classical physics says you can remove all energy from this system, cool it to absolute zero, stop all motion. The particle sits at the bottom of the well, motionless, zero energy. Quantum mechanics says no, you cannot remove all energy, cannot stop all motion, cannot reach true zero, because the uncertainty principle forbids it. If the particle has definite position at the bottom of the well, then its momentum is completely uncertain. Infinite uncertainty in momentum means infinite energy. Conversely, if the particle has zero momentum, zero motion, then its position is completely uncertain. It could be anywhere. These constraints mean the particle must always retain some energy, some irreducible minimum that cannot be extracted, cannot be removed, cannot be eliminated. This is zero-point energy, the energy that remains when everything that can be removed has been removed, the energy of nothing, of the emptiest possible state. For a single oscillator, this energy is tiny, 1/2 h bar omega, half a quantum of energy, negligible for most purposes. But the universe is not a single oscillator. Every quantum field at every point in space is an oscillator. The electromagnetic field oscillates. The electron field oscillates. The quark fields oscillate. The gluon field. The weak fields. The Higgs field. Every field at every point, and every oscillator has zero-point energy, half a quantum at every frequency at every point. The total is the sum over all frequencies at all points in all of space. This sum diverges, goes to infinity. This is not mathematical artifact. This is genuine problem. The straightforward calculation of vacuum energy gives infinite result. Physicists handle this through renormalization. Subtract the infinities, redefine quantities, extract finite predictions. This works for calculating particle interactions, for predicting experimental outcomes, for doing practical physics. But the subtracted infinity is real. The vacuum energy is real. And its magnitude is the source of the cosmological constant problem we encountered in Part 1. The predicted energy density 10 to the 113 joules per cubic meter versus the observed 10 to the negative 10, the most embarrassing calculation in all of physics. But embarrassment is not the important thing. The important thing is what zero-point energy means, what it tells us about the nature of nothing, about the nature of reality, about the relationship between emptiness and existence. 0-point energy means the vacuum is alive, vibrating, fluctuating, at every point, at every frequency, at every moment. Not because something is happening to it, not because energy is being added, but because quantum mechanics requires it. The vacuum fluctuates by necessity, by law, by the mathematical structure of reality itself. Stillness is forbidden. Silence is impossible. The void must hum, must vibrate, must create. This is not choice. This is compulsion. The deepest compulsion in physics, more fundamental than gravity, more fundamental than electromagnetism, more fundamental than any force. The requirement that nothing cannot be truly nothing. That emptiness must contain energy, that the void must create. And this 0-point energy has physical consequences, real consequences, measurable consequences beyond the Casimir effect we discussed. Consider the Lamb shift. In 1947, Willis Lamb measured the energy levels of hydrogen atoms with unprecedented precision. He found that two energy levels that should be identical, according to basic quantum mechanics, were slightly different. The two s and two p levels of hydrogen were split by a tiny amount, about 1000 megahertz. This was inexplicable in ordinary quantum mechanics. The explanation came from quantum electrodynamics, from the interaction between the electron and the vacuum. The electron in the hydrogen atom does not exist in empty space. It exists in the quantum vacuum surrounded by virtual particles, virtual photons, virtual electron-positron pairs. These virtual particles interact with the real electron, push it, pull it, slightly alter its energy, shift its position within the atom, and this shift produces the Lamb shift. The measured energy difference between levels that should be degenerate. The vacuum, the nothing, the empty space around the electron is affecting the electron's energy. Nothing is doing something to something. The void is reaching into the atom and rearranging its energy levels, and the calculation matches the measurement to 12 decimal places. This is the most precise prediction in all of science. 12 digits of agreement between theoretical prediction and experimental measurement, and the prediction depends entirely on the vacuum being active, on nothing being full, on empty space teeming with virtual particles that interact with real matter. Remove the vacuum fluctuations from the calculation and the prediction fails. The 12-digit agreement vanishes. The Lamb shift cannot be explained without the creative vacuum, without nothing doing something. This is proof, not philosophical argument, not theological assertion. Experimental proof that the vacuum is active, that nothing creates, that emptiness has physical effects on real matter to 12 decimal places of precision. No theory in the history of science has been confirmed with greater accuracy, and the theory requires the vacuum to be creative, requires nothing to be something, requires emptiness to overflow with activity that measurably affects the physical world. There are other proofs. The spontaneous emission of photons by excited atoms. An atom in an excited state should remain there forever if the vacuum were truly empty. Classical physics says excited states are stable without external perturbation, but atoms emit photons spontaneously, drop to lower energy states without being pushed. Why? Because the vacuum pushes them. Virtual photons in the vacuum interact with the excited electron, stimulate emission, cause the atom to radiate. Without the creative vacuum, atoms would never emit light spontaneously. Lasers would not work. Fluorescence would not exist. The colors you see when substances glow are caused by the vacuum. By nothing stimulating atoms to release light, every photon of spontaneous emission is evidence that the vacuum is active, that nothing is doing something, and the van der Waals force, the attraction between neutral atoms, between molecules that have no charge, no magnetic moment, no obvious reason to attract each other. Yet they do, weakly but measurably. The force holds liquid helium together, helps geckos climb walls, contributes to protein folding in your body, and it comes from the vacuum, from coordinated fluctuations of virtual particles around each atom. The vacuum fluctuations near one atom influence the fluctuations near another, creating correlation, creating attraction. Nothing pulling things together through coordinated nothingness. The void organizing itself around matter to create forces between objects that should not attract. This is real. This is measured. This is the vacuum acting on the physical world. The anomalous magnetic moment of the electron provides even stronger confirmation. The electron has a magnetic moment, a tiny magnet created by its spin. Basic quantum mechanics predicts the magnetic moment to be exactly 2 inches certain units. But it is not exactly 2. It is 2.00231930436.256. The deviation from 2, the anomalous part, comes entirely from vacuum interactions, from the electron interacting with virtual particles in the vacuum, from nothing affecting the electron's magnetic properties, and the calculated value using quantum electrodynamics, including all vacuum contributions, matches the measured value to better than 1 part in a trillion. 1 part in 10 to the 12th. This is accuracy beyond anything else in science. And it depends entirely on the vacuum being active, on nothing contributing measurably to the electron's properties. The electron, the electron in your atoms, in your neurons, in your brain, is not what it would be without the vacuum. The vacuum makes the electron slightly more magnetic, slightly different from the bare particle. The nothing surrounding every electron in your body has altered them, has shaped them, has contributed to their properties in ways measured to 12 significant figures. You are made of particles shaped by nothing, altered by the void, modified by empty space. The vacuum is not passive background, it is active participant. It contributes to the properties of every particle in existence. Every electron, every quark, every particle that interacts with quantum fields is dressed by the vacuum, surrounded by a cloud of virtual particles that change its mass, that change its charge, that change its magnetic moment. The bare particle, the particle without vacuum dressing, does not exist, has never existed, cannot exist, because the vacuum is always there, always active, always dressing, always contributing. There is no particle without the vacuum, no matter without nothing, no something without the creative void. Now go deeper, beyond individual particles, beyond atoms, to the structure of space itself. Quantum field theory treats space as the arena where fields exist, the stage on which the drama of physics plays out. But quantum gravity, though we do not yet have a complete theory, suggests space itself might emerge from quantum processes, might not be fundamental, might be constructed from something deeper. Some approaches suggest space emerges from quantum entanglement. The ER equals EPR conjecture, proposed by Juan Maldacena and Leonard Susskind, suggests that the connection between entangled particles, Einstein-Rosen bridge, is the same as the wormhole, connecting distant points in space-time. Entanglement creates spatial connection. More entanglement, more connection, more space. If this is correct, then space itself is woven from quantum correlations, from relationships between quantum systems, and the vacuum, the ground state of these quantum systems, is what maintains space, what holds it together, what prevents it from tearing apart. The vacuum does not just fill space. The vacuum might be space. The creative nothing might be the fabric of reality itself. Not content within a container, but the container. Not energy within space, but the energy that is space. This is speculative, not confirmed, not established physics. But it emerges from serious theoretical work by serious physicists. And if true, it means the question of why the vacuum creates is identical to the question of why space exists. Why is there spatial extent rather than no dimensions at all? Why does the universe have room for things to happen? The vacuum might be the answer, might be what room is, what extent is, what dimensionality is. The creative nothing might be the most fundamental thing in the universe, not because it contains everything, but because it is everything, structured differently at different points, excited differently, fluctuating differently, but always the same underlying creative void, expressing itself as particles, as forces, as matter, as energy, as space itself. This echoes something ancient, something that predates physics by millennia, the theological concept of creatio continua, continuous creation, not the idea that God created once in the past and then withdrew, but the idea that God creates continuously, that every moment is creation moment, that existence requires continuous creative act, that if the creative power were withdrawn for even an instant, everything would cease. Not decay, not fade, cease, instantly, completely. Thomas Aquinas argued this in the 13th century. God as sustainer, not just originator. The universe does not coast on an initial creative impulse. It is held in existence by continuous creative act. Remove the act and existence vanishes, not because of destruction, because existence was never self-sustaining, was always dependent, always contingent, always requiring the creative ground to maintain it. The quantum vacuum operates identically. It does not create once, it creates continuously. The virtual particles appear and disappear constantly. The zero-point energy persists. The vacuum expectation values remain. The fluctuations never stop. And if they stopped, if the vacuum somehow became truly empty, truly silent, truly void, matter would change. Particle properties would change. The Lamb shift would disappear. The anomalous magnetic moment would revert to exactly 2. Atoms would behave differently. Chemistry would change. You would change. Everything would change. Because everything depends on the vacuum's continuous creative activity, on nothing continuously doing something, on emptiness continuously overflowing. This is not analogy. This is not metaphor. This is structural identity. The vacuum and theological sustaining power do the same thing. Continuous creation from nothing, maintaining existence moment by moment. Physics describes the mechanism. Theology names the source. Both point to the same reality. Existence is not self-sustaining. Existence requires continuous creative power. And that power, whether you call it vacuum or God, operates from nothing to produce everything at every moment, without pause, without rest, without end. But here is where the parallel becomes uncomfortable for both sides. For theology, the discomfort is that the vacuum is not personal, not conscious, not intentional. It does not choose to create, does not love its creation, does not have purpose or plan. It simply fluctuates because the mathematics requires fluctuation. This is very different from the God of Abraham, or the God of Jesus, or the God of Muhammad. A personal God who creates with intention, who sustains with love, who has relationship with creation. The vacuum has no relationship with anything. It is impersonal, automatic, mathematical. If the vacuum is how God creates, then God creates through impersonal, automatic, mathematical process. This is deism, not theism. Design without designer in the ongoing sense. Rules set and running. No intervention, no attention, no care. Some theologians accept this. Others find it insufficient. A God who creates through vacuum fluctuations is God without personality, without will, without the qualities that make God God in most religious traditions. For physics, the discomfort is different. Physics cannot explain the vacuum, cannot explain why it has the properties it has, cannot explain why zero-point energy exists, cannot explain why the cosmological constant is fine-tuned, cannot explain why anything exists rather than nothing. The vacuum is the foundation of physical theory, the ground state, the starting point, and it is unexplained. Not just currently unexplained, possibly permanently unexplained, because explaining the vacuum would require deeper theory. And that deeper theory would have its own vacuum, its own ground state, its own unexplained foundation. The regression might be infinite, or it might terminate in something that simply is. Brute fact. Unexplained explainer. Uncaused cause. This is the explanatory cliff. Every chain of explanation ends somewhere. Why does the apple fall? Gravity. Why does gravity exist? Space-time curvature. Why does space-time curve? Mass energy tells space-time how to curve. Why? General relativity says so. Why does general relativity hold? Because the Einstein field equations describe nature accurately. Why those equations? We do not know. Every chain of why reaches a point where the answer is either we do not know or it just is. And the vacuum is that point for quantum field theory. Why does the vacuum fluctuate? Because quantum mechanics requires it. Why does quantum mechanics require it? Because the uncertainty principle. Why the uncertainty principle? Because the mathematical structure of quantum theory. Why that structure? Silence. The vacuum is the wall, the floor, the bedrock where the drilling stops, and you either accept what you find, or you call it God, or you call it mystery, or you call it brute fact, but you stop digging, because there is nowhere deeper to dig with the tools of physics. An uncaused cause is a theological concept, Aristotle's unmoved mover, Aquinas' first cause, the thing that starts the chain of explanation without itself requiring explanation. Physics might be pointing towards such a thing without naming it. The vacuum might be it, or the vacuum might point toward it, or the vacuum might be one manifestation of something deeper that is it. And that something, whether you call it God or ground state or ultimate reality or brute fact, is where physics and theology converge, not in agreement about what it is, but in agreement that it exists. That something foundational must exist. That explanation must either regress infinitely or terminate. And if it terminates in something unexplained. Something that simply is. Something that creates without being created. Something from which everything comes. Something that theology calls God, and physics calls the vacuum, and philosophy calls necessary being, and mathematics calls axiom. Different names, perhaps different things, perhaps the same thing seen from different angles. We do not know. But the quantum vacuum gives us something unprecedented. For the first time in human history, we have mathematical description of creation from nothing. Not poetic description, not mythological description, not theological assertion, mathematical description, equations that specify exactly how virtual particles emerge from vacuum, how fluctuations produce matter, how nothing becomes something through precise, quantifiable process. This is new. This changes the conversation between science and theology permanently, because now creation from nothing is not matter of faith alone. It is matter of physics, observable, measurable, calculable to 12 decimal places. The question is no longer whether creation from nothing occurs. It does. The question is whether creation from nothing requires a creator, whether the vacuum is self-explanatory, or whether it points beyond itself, whether the mathematical laws that govern vacuum fluctuations are ultimate reality, or whether they are description of something deeper, whether the equations are the thing itself or merely the language in which the thing expresses itself. Physics frames this question with unprecedented precision, but cannot answer it, because the answer lies beyond the reach of experiment, beyond the boundary of empirical science. In the domain where physics ends and metaphysics begins, where mechanism gives way to meaning, where how yields to why, where the creative vacuum either explains itself or cries out for explanation from something that transcends it. And this brings us to perhaps the strangest discovery in all of vacuum physics, the discovery that nothing comes in different kinds. That vacuum is not unique, that emptiness has structure, that the void has architecture. Physicists have discovered that the vacuum of our universe is one vacuum among potentially many, each with different properties, different energies, different creative powers, different physics. The string theory landscape suggests 10 to the 500 possible vacuum states, each one a different way for nothing to be configured, each one producing different particles, different forces, different constants, different universes. Our vacuum, our nothing, our creative void is one possibility among 10 to the 500. One way for emptiness to be organized among a number so large it dwarfs the number of atoms in the observable universe by hundreds of orders of magnitude. Why this vacuum? Why this nothing? Why this particular configuration of emptiness rather than any of the other 10 to the 500 possibilities? Each alternative vacuum would produce a different universe. Different particles, different forces, different chemistry, different possibilities for structure, complexity, life, consciousness. Most alternative vacuums would not permit life, would not permit complexity, would not permit observers asking why this vacuum rather than another. Only a tiny fraction of the 10 to the 500 possible vacuums produce universes where questions can be asked. We are in one of those rare vacuums, one of the few where nothing creates the right something, where the creative power of the void is calibrated precisely enough to permit atoms and stars and planets and brains and thoughts. Is this accident? Selection effect in a multiverse where all vacuums exist somewhere? Or is this choice? Selection by intelligence, by purpose, by intention? The vacuum of our universe creates exactly what is needed for consciousness to emerge. Not too much, not too little. Not too violent, not too quiet. The Goldilocks vacuum. The nothing that is just right. And consider what just right means in quantitative terms. The vacuum energy must be tuned to 123 decimal places. The Higgs vacuum expectation value must be 246 GeV, not 300, not 200, not any other value. The quark condensate must have specific density. The strong coupling constant must be precisely calibrated. Change any of these by fractions of a percent and chemistry fails. Protons become unstable, neutrons cannot form, carbon cannot be synthesized in stars, water cannot have its anomalous properties, DNA cannot replicate, consciousness cannot emerge from matter. The vacuum is not just fine-tuned, it is fine-tuned multiply, in every parameter, in every field, in every coupling constant, all simultaneously, all compatibly, all producing a universe where beings can exist to discover the fine-tuning. The probability of this by chance is so small that the number has no meaning. It is effectively zero, unless there are 10 to the 500 universes, in which case it becomes inevitable somewhere. And we are that somewhere. This is the multiverse argument, not proven, not provable perhaps, but the only naturalistic alternative to design, the only way to explain fine-tuning without invoking intelligence. Either there are unimaginably many universes and we won the lottery, or there is intention behind the parameters, or there is no explanation. The vacuum is what it is. Brute fact. No reason. No cause. No why. Just is. This is either the greatest coincidence in the history of existence, or evidence of something that chose. Physics cannot decide, can only describe, can only calculate, can only observe that the vacuum is what it is and that what it is permits us. The deeper question remains, why this nothing? Why does the void create this particular everything? Why is emptiness configured to produce consciousness? And whether the answer involves God or multiverse or brute fact or something no one has yet imagined, the question itself emerges from physics, from quantum field theory, from the precise mathematical description of creation from nothing that is the most successful theory in the history of human thought. And there is one more thing, one more discovery about the vacuum that changes everything. That makes the theological parallel so precise it becomes almost impossible to ignore. The vacuum is not just creative. The vacuum is information. The vacuum state is quantum state. It contains quantum information. And quantum information, according to the holographic principle, might be the most fundamental thing in the universe. More fundamental than matter. More fundamental than energy. More fundamental than space itself. The holographic principle emerged from black hole physics, from the work of Jacob Bekenstein and Stephen Hawking in the 1970s. They discovered that black holes have entropy, have information content, and that the information is proportional not to the volume of the black hole, but to the surface area of its event horizon. This was shocking. Information should scale with volume. A room twice as large should hold twice as much information. But black holes say no. The maximum information in any region of space is proportional to the surrounding surface area, not the volume. This implies that the three-dimensional interior is somehow encoded on the two-dimensional surface, that the volume is hologram projected from the boundary, that depth is illusion, that what we perceive as three-dimensional space might be projection of two-dimensional information. Gerard Hooft formalized this. Leonard Susskind developed it. Juan Maldacena proved a specific version in string theory, the ADS-CFT correspondence, a mathematical proof that physics in a volume of space with gravity is exactly equivalent to physics on the boundary without gravity. The bulk is hologram of the boundary. 3 dimensions from 2, gravity from no gravity, space from information. This is not speculation. This is proven mathematical equivalence, used by thousands of physicists daily, the most cited paper in theoretical physics. And what is the boundary? What is the thing from which space and gravity emerge? Information. Quantum information. The quantum state on the boundary encodes everything that happens in the bulk. Every particle, every force, every interaction, every event in the three-dimensional space, with gravity is encoded in quantum information on the two-dimensional boundary. Without gravity, reality is information. Space is information organized differently. Matter is information excited. Energy is information in motion. And the vacuum, the ground state, the empty space from which everything emerges, the vacuum is the ground state of this information, the lowest energy configuration of quantum data from which all excitations, all particles, all forces emerge. The vacuum is the base code, the operating system, the foundational information from which reality boots up. The nothing that creates everything is information creating reality. The vacuum might be information creating reality, data generating existence, logos producing cosmos. Logos, the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. John chapter 1 verses 1 through 3. The theological claim that reality originates from divine information, from the Word, from logos, from structured, meaningful, creative information that precedes matter, that precedes energy, that precedes space, and quantum physics discovering that the vacuum is quantum information, that reality might emerge from informational ground state, that the creative nothing might be fundamentally informational. The parallel extends further than Christianity. In Judaism, the creation account in Genesis describes God speaking reality into existence. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God said, "Let there be a firmament," and there was a firmament. Creation through speech, through language. through information structured into commands that produce physical reality. The Hebrew word davar means both word and thing. Language and reality are the same concept. The thing is the word that created it. The universe is God's speech made physical. In Islam, the Quran describes creation through the command kun fayakun, be and it is. The divine command creates, not through physical labor, not through material manipulation, but through informational command. Pure instruction producing physical reality. And Islamic theology emphasizes that this command is not past tense. Not God said be. God says be, continuously, at every moment. The sustaining command that holds reality in existence is ongoing informational act. Without the command, nothing persists. Without the word, nothing exists. In Hinduism, the concept of Shabda Brahman describes ultimate reality as cosmic sound, as vibration, as information in the form of primordial frequency. The universe emerges from Om, from sound, from vibration that is simultaneously physical and informational. Matter is condensed vibration. Energy is vibration in motion. Consciousness is vibration, becoming aware of itself, all from the primordial informational ground. These traditions, spanning thousands of years, spanning continents, spanning cultures, all converge on the same intuition. Reality emerges from information, from word, from logos, from command, from vibration, from structured creative data that precedes and produces the physical world. And quantum physics, after centuries of materialist assumption, after decades of treating information as secondary to matter, is arriving at the same conclusion. Information might be primary, matter might be secondary. The vacuum might be informational ground state from which physical reality emerges. The void might be full of data, and that data might be what creates everything. This convergence does not prove theology correct, does not prove physics supports religion, does not prove God exists, but it demonstrates something remarkable. The deepest intuitions of human spiritual traditions and the most advanced calculations of modern physics point in the same direction, toward information as foundation, toward creative logos as ground of being, toward the word that speaks reality into existence being not poetry but perhaps literal description of how nothing becomes something. Through information, through structure, through the quantum state of the vacuum encoding the possibility of everything that exists. Whether you call this God, or call it physics, or call it mathematics, or call it accident, the phenomenon is the same. The void is not void, nothing is not nothing. Emptiness overflows with creative informational power that produces everything from nothing continuously, and this is the most remarkable fact about existence. Not that things exist, but that they exist from nothing. That the ground of reality is creative void, that the foundation of everything is structured emptiness, that the most full, most active, most productive state in all of physics is the state that contains no particles, no matter no energy in the classical sense, just quantum potential, just fluctuation, just information waiting to become real. This is where we stand, at the intersection of quantum field theory and theology, at the boundary between the most precise science ever achieved and the oldest questions ever asked. The vacuum creates. This is proven. The vacuum is fine-tuned. This is observed. The vacuum is informational. This is theorized. And whether the vacuum is God's mechanism or God's replacement or neither or both remains the deepest open question at the foundation of everything we know and everything we are. In part 3, we go to the final question, the question behind all questions, the question the vacuum forces us to ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? Not how. We know how. The vacuum fluctuates, particles emerge, creation occurs. We know the mechanism to 12 decimal places, but why? Why does the mechanism exist? Why does the vacuum create rather than not create? Why is there a vacuum at all rather than absolute non-existence? No vacuum, no fields, no laws, no mathematics, no space, no time, true nothing, not quantum nothing which is full, but philosophical nothing. The absence of everything, including the absence of quantum mechanics itself. Why does even quantum nothing exist? This is the final question. The question physics cannot reach. The question that lies beyond the vacuum, beyond the fields, beyond the equations. The question that might have no answer, or might have the only answer that matters. Why is there something rather than nothing? This is the question. The oldest question. The hardest question. The question that every civilization has asked in every language, in every era of human history. The question that children ask and philosophers cannot answer. The question that physics sharpens but cannot resolve. The question that lies at the foundation of everything. Beneath every equation, beneath every measurement, beneath every theory, beneath every discovery. Why does anything exist at all? Not how does the universe work. We are learning that. Not what is the universe made of. We are discovering that. Not when did the universe begin. We have measured that 13.8 billion years ago. But why? Why is there a universe to work, to be made of, to begin? Why does reality exist rather than not exist? Why is there something, anything, everything, rather than absolute nothing? This is not the quantum nothing we have been exploring, not the creative vacuum seething with virtual particles and zero-point energy and quantum fluctuations. That nothing is something. That nothing is the most active state in physics. That nothing creates. We have established this, measured it, confirmed it to 12 decimal places. The quantum vacuum is not truly empty, is not truly nothing, is full of creative potential, is the source of all matter, all energy, all structure. But this just pushes the question back. Why does the quantum vacuum exist? Why is there a creative nothing rather than an absolute nothing? Why are there quantum fields at all? Why are there laws governing those fields? Why is there mathematics describing those laws? Why is there anything whatsoever? The quantum vacuum explains how something comes from nothing, but it does not explain why there is a quantum vacuum. It is like explaining where rain comes from by pointing to clouds. Correct, rain comes from clouds. But where do clouds come from? From evaporation. Where does evaporation come from? From heat, from the sun, from nuclear fusion, from gravity, from the Big Bang, from quantum fluctuations, from the vacuum, from what? Each answer generates a new question. Each explanation requires a deeper explanation. And at the bottom, at the very bottom, the question remains unanswered. Why does the bottom exist? Why is there a bottom at all? Some physicists attempt to answer. Lawrence Krauss wrote a book called A Universe from Nothing. He argued that quantum mechanics explains why there is something rather than nothing. The vacuum fluctuates. Particles emerge. Under the right conditions, an entire universe can emerge from vacuum fluctuation. Inflation amplifies it. Gravity provides negative energy that balances the positive energy of matter. Total energy of the universe might be exactly zero, so the universe is literally nothing reorganized, nothing rearranged, nothing structured differently, but still nothing in total. The book's balance. Energy from nothing, energy returns to nothing total, is zero. The universe is elaborate, zero. This is clever, mathematically elegant, possibly even correct as description of mechanism. But it does not answer the question. Because Krauss's nothing is not nothing. His nothing is the quantum vacuum, which has properties, has laws, has fields, has energy, has the capacity to fluctuate. This is something very specific, something with highly tuned parameters, something that obeys precise mathematical rules. Calling it nothing does not make it nothing. It is the most sophisticated something in all of physics dressed in the word nothing. The question remains, why does this sophisticated something exist? Why are there quantum fields with these properties? Why does the vacuum have the capacity to create? Krauss explains how the universe emerges from the vacuum. He does not explain why there is a vacuum. David Albert, the philosopher, made this criticism precisely in his review of Krauss's book. He pointed out that relativistic quantum field theory is not nothing, is very specific something. The fact that it allows universes to emerge from vacuum states does not explain why relativistic quantum field theory exists, does not explain why there are laws of physics, does not explain why mathematics works, does not explain why anything is real. The question persists untouched by the physics, no matter how sophisticated the physics becomes. Because the question is not about physics, it is about existence itself, about being, about why there is a reality in which physics operates rather than no reality at all. Other approaches exist. Some physicists invoke mathematical necessity. Max Tegmark proposes the mathematical universe hypothesis. All mathematical structures exist physically. Every consistent mathematical system is a universe. Our universe is one mathematical structure among infinitely many. It exists because mathematics exists, and mathematics exists necessarily. Mathematical truths are true in all possible worlds. 2 + 2 = 4 cannot be otherwise. So mathematical structures necessarily exist, and our universe being one such structure necessarily exists. This is bold, perhaps too bold. The claim that mathematical existence equals physical existence is an enormous leap. That equations on paper are the same as particles in space. That abstract structure is identical to concrete reality. Most philosophers reject this identification. Mathematical objects seem different from physical objects. Numbers do not have temperature. Equations do not have weight. The gap between abstract and concrete seems unbridgeable. But Tegmark argues the gap is illusion, that what we call physical is just what mathematical structure looks like from inside. That consciousness experiencing mathematics is what creates the illusion of physicality. This is fascinating, possibly profound, possibly confused. We cannot tell yet. But even if correct, it pushes the question back one step. Why does mathematics exist? Why are there mathematical truths at all? Why is 2 + 2 4 rather than nothing? Why does logical structure exist rather than no logic, no structure, no truth, no falsehood, no anything? Perhaps the question has no answer. Perhaps why is there something rather than nothing is a malformed question. Like asking what is north of the North Pole. Grammatically correct, but meaningless. Perhaps existence does not require explanation. Perhaps being is the default. Perhaps nothing is impossible. Not just quantum mechanically impossible, but logically impossible. Perhaps absolute non-existence is contradiction, because non-existence would be a state, and a state is something. So pure nothing cannot be, because being nothing would be being something. The concept self-destructs. Nothing cannot exist because existing contradicts nothingness. Therefore, something must exist. Not this something necessarily. Not this universe with these laws. But something. Any something. Being is logically necessary. Non-existence is logically impossible. This argument has ancient roots. Parmenides argued in 5th century BCE that non-being is impossible, that what is cannot not be, that existence is necessary. The argument is elegant but slippery. It might confuse logical impossibility with metaphysical impossibility. It might confuse our inability to conceive nothing with nothing's actual impossibility. Perhaps absolute nothing is possible but unimaginable. Perhaps our minds cannot grasp true non-existence because our minds are something. The tool we use to contemplate nothing is itself something. So nothing will always be inconceivable, not because it is impossible, but because conceiving requires a conceiver, and a conceiver is not nothing. We are trapped by our own existence, unable to stand outside being and ask why being exists, unable to access non-existence to compare it with existence, unable to perform the experiment that would answer the question. You cannot create absolute nothing in a laboratory. You cannot remove everything, including the laboratory, including space, including time, including the laws of physics, and observe what remains. Because removing everything removes the observer, removes the observation, removes the experiment itself. The question, why is there something rather than nothing, might be unanswerable, not because the answer is too complex, but because the question requires a perspective we cannot occupy. The perspective of nothing, looking at something and asking why. But nothing has no perspective. Nothing cannot look, cannot ask, cannot wonder. Only something can wonder about nothing. And by the time something is wondering, the question is already answered. Something exists. Here it is, wondering. This is where theology has traditionally stepped in, with an answer, not a proof, not a demonstration, an answer offered in faith and defended by reason. God. God exists necessarily. God is the reason something exists rather than nothing. God is the answer to why. Not a God within the universe, not a being among beings, not an entity occupying space and time, but the ground of being itself, the source of existence, the reason anything is real, the necessary foundation without which contingent reality cannot exist. The cosmological argument in its various forms makes this case. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. The cause cannot be physical because it causes physics, cannot be temporal because it causes time, cannot be spatial because it causes space, must be beyond physics, beyond time, beyond space, must be necessary, not contingent, must exist by its own nature, not dependent on anything else, must be the uncaused cause, the unmoved mover, the self-existent ground, and this is what all people call God. The argument is ancient, refined over centuries by Aristotle, by Aquinas, by Leibniz, by modern philosophers of religion. It has been criticized equally long. Hume questioned causation itself. Kant limited the reach of pure reason. Russell said the universe is just there and that is all. Modern critics point out that quantum mechanics allows uncaused events, that the universe might be necessary rather than contingent, that the argument commits fallacy of composition, that even if successful, it proves only that a necessary ground exists, not that this ground is personal or conscious or loving or anything resembling the God of religion. These criticisms have force. The cosmological argument does not prove the God of Abraham, does not prove the God of Islam, does not prove the God of Christianity. At best, it suggests that some necessary ground of being exists, some uncaused cause, some reason why something rather than nothing. But this ground might be impersonal, might be mathematical, might be the vacuum itself, might be logical necessity, might be something we have no concept for and no word to describe. Calling it God imports meaning that the argument cannot support, but not calling it God ignores the possibility that it is God, that the ground of being is conscious and intentional and personal, that the reason something exists is because something chose to create, because mind preceded matter, because consciousness is more fundamental than physics. The quantum vacuum makes this question more precise than ever before, because now we know what creation from nothing looks like physically. We know the mechanism, we know the mathematics, we know the predictions and confirmations, and we can ask with unprecedented precision whether this mechanism is self-explanatory or whether it requires something beyond itself. Whether the vacuum is the ground, or whether the vacuum has a ground, whether nothing creating something is the final answer, or whether the final answer explains why nothing creates. And here the vacuum itself offers a strange clue. The vacuum is quantum state. It contains quantum information. It is the ground state of quantum fields. And quantum states have a peculiar property. They require description. They require mathematics. They require structure. A quantum state is not a thing floating in the void. A quantum state is a vector in Hilbert space, a mathematical object in abstract mathematical structure. The vacuum exists in mathematics, is defined by mathematics, is constituted by mathematics. Without the mathematical structure, there is no vacuum. Without Hilbert space, there is no quantum state. Without the Schrödinger equation, there is no evolution. Without the symmetry groups, there are no fields. The vacuum depends on mathematics, the way a sentence depends on language. Remove the language, and the sentence does not become meaningless. It ceases to exist. So the vacuum is not self-sufficient. It depends on mathematical structure, on logical relations, on abstract framework that precedes it. Logically, if not temporally, the vacuum is expression of mathematics, manifestation of abstract structure, physical incarnation of logical possibility. And this means the question, why does the vacuum exist, translates to, why does this mathematical structure exist? Why does this particular framework of Hilbert spaces and symmetry groups and field equations exist, rather than some other or none at all? And now we are back to the deepest question in a new form. Why does the mathematics exist that makes the creative vacuum possible? Is the mathematics necessary? Does it exist in all possible worlds? Is there no alternative? Or is it contingent? Could different mathematics exist? Could no mathematics exist? If the mathematics is necessary, then the vacuum is necessary, and creation from nothing is necessary, and the universe is necessary, and we are necessary. Everything that exists must exist, could not exist. There is no alternative to reality. This is mathematical determinism, beautiful but hard to swallow. It means there is no freedom in the foundation, no choice, no design, no God who chose this over that. Just mathematical necessity producing everything, including the illusion that things could be otherwise. If the mathematics is contingent, then something chose it, or nothing chose it, and it is accident. And accident seems impossible for mathematics. Mathematical truths do not feel accidental, they feel necessary. 2 + 2 cannot accidentally equal 4. Circles cannot accidentally have pi as their ratio. These seem like truths that must hold. And if they must hold, then the mathematical structure of reality must hold. And if the mathematical structure must hold, then the vacuum must be what it is. And creation from nothing must occur, and the universe must exist. Necessity all the way down. But this might be our limited perspective again. We might confuse familiarity with necessity. We know this mathematics because we live in this universe. The mathematics describes our reality. Of course, it seems necessary. It is the only mathematics we have experienced, but other mathematical structures might be equally valid, equally consistent, equally necessary. And if multiple mathematical structures are necessary, then multiple universes exist, multiple realities, multiple creations from multiple nothings. The multiverse again, not as speculation but as consequence of mathematical necessity. And if you accept the multiverse, you still face the question, why does the multiverse exist? Why do all mathematical structures exist physically? Why is there mathematical reality rather than no reality at all? The question will not die, cannot die, because every answer, every theory, every framework exists within reality, is part of something, and something is what we are trying to explain. We cannot explain something from within something. We would need to stand outside everything and look at it and ask why. But outside everything is nothing, and nothing cannot look, cannot ask, cannot explain. Consider how strange this is. The question, why? Is there something rather than nothing? Presupposes a perspective from which both something and nothing can be evaluated, a vantage point from which one can compare existence with non-existence and ask why the former obtains rather than the latter. But such a vantage point would itself be something, would itself exist, would already answer the question by existing. The question devours itself. It requires non-existence to be accessible. But non-existence cannot be accessed because accessing requires existing. The very act of asking why there is something proves there is something. The question contains its own answer, but the answer is not satisfying. Yes, something exists. Obviously. I am asking the question, therefore I exist. But why do I exist? Why does anything? The circularity does not resolve the mystery. It deepens it. Some physicists find peace in the circularity. John Wheeler proposed the participatory universe. Observers create reality through quantum measurement, and reality creates observers through evolution. The universe creates consciousness, and consciousness creates the universe, a self-exciting circuit, a closed loop of existence explaining itself. The vacuum fluctuates, creating matter. Matter evolves, creating minds. Minds observe collapsing wave functions. Wave function collapse creates definite reality. Definite reality contains the vacuum that fluctuates. The loop closes. Nothing outside the loop is needed. The universe is self-creating, self-sustaining, self-explaining. A bootstrapped existence pulling itself into being by its own quantum bootstraps. This is beautiful, possibly true, but it does not explain why the loop exists. Why is there a self-exciting circuit rather than no circuit? Why does the bootstrap work? Why does quantum mechanics permit self-creation? The loop might be how the universe exists, but it is not why. The how is physics. The why remains mystery. We are stuck inside the question, permanently, unless the question answers itself, unless existence is self-explanatory in a way we have not yet grasped. Some philosophers suggest this. Hegel argued that being and nothing are identical. That pure being without any determination, without any quality, is indistinguishable from pure nothing. They are the same concept viewed from different angles. And from their identity, from this collision of being and nothing comes becoming, comes process, comes reality. Being is nothing, nothing is being, and the tension between them produces everything. This sounds obscure, abstract, but the quantum vacuum embodies it physically. The vacuum is both nothing and something simultaneously. It contains no particles, yet produces particles constantly. It has no matter, yet constitutes the foundation of all matter. It is the emptiest possible state, yet overflows with energy. It is being and nothing simultaneously. And from this identity, from this quantum coincidence of opposites, comes becoming, comes creation, comes the universe. Hegel's dialectic instantiated in physics. Thesis, nothing. Antithesis, something. Synthesis, the creative vacuum that is both and neither, producing reality from the tension between existence and non-existence. This might be the answer. Not God, not accident, not necessity, but dialectic, the self-resolving tension between being and nothing that produces becoming. The quantum vacuum as physical manifestation of the oldest philosophical insight, that opposites generate reality. That contradiction is creative, that the tension between what is and what is not is the engine of existence. This is speculative philosophy, not physics, but it maps onto the physics with uncanny precision. The vacuum is the coincidence of opposites, the state that is simultaneously nothing and everything, empty and full, silent and roaring with creative activity. And from this coincidence, reality emerges. Not once, but continuously. Not somewhere, but everywhere. Not sometimes, but always. Perhaps this is what all the traditions are pointing to. What physics measures, what theology worships, what philosophy contemplates. The creative tension at the heart of reality. The productive paradox of nothing being something. The mystery that emptiness overflows. Different languages describing the same phenomenon. The same astonishing fact about existence. That the foundation is paradox. That the ground is groundless. That the source of everything is nothing. And that nothing is not what you think it is. This is perhaps the most honest conclusion. The most intellectually humble position. We do not know why there is something rather than nothing. We might never know. The question might be beyond the reach of any mind embedded in reality. Any consciousness that exists is already something. Already on the wrong side of the question. Already unable to access the nothing from which something arose. We can describe the vacuum, calculate its properties, predict its effects, marvel at its creative power, but we cannot explain why it exists, why it creates, why anything is real. And this is where physics and theology find their deepest common ground. Not in answering the question, but in asking it. In standing before the mystery of existence with honesty and wonder. Physics says the vacuum creates, cannot explain why. Theology says God creates, cannot prove it. Both face the same abyss, the same bottomless why. The same mystery that no equation and no prayer and no argument can penetrate. Why something? Why anything? Why us? Why now? Why here? Why at all? The vacuum is the most remarkable thing in physics, not because it is empty, because it is not. Because nothing is the fullest, most creative, most productive state in all of reality. Because emptiness overflows. Because void creates. Because the absence of everything is the presence of everything in potential. Because the ground state contains all possible excitations, all possible particles, all possible universes, encoded in quantum information, waiting to become real, already becoming real, continuously, ceaselessly, at every point in space, at every moment in time. You are evidence. Your existence proves the vacuum creates. Your consciousness demonstrates that nothing can produce something so complex that it asks why it exists. You are the vacuum's question to itself. The void wondering why it is not void, nothing contemplating its own creativity, emptiness astonished by its own fullness. This is not poetry. This is logical consequence of the physics we have explored. You are made of vacuum energy. 99% of your mass is binding energy from the QCD vacuum. Your particles are excitations of quantum fields that exist because the vacuum supports them. Your thoughts are patterns of neural activity enabled by atoms, held together by forces mediated by virtual particles emerging from nothing. You are nothing become conscious. You are the void aware of itself. And if theology is right, if the vacuum is God's mechanism, if the creative nothing is divine power expressed through quantum field theory, then you are God's thought become physical, God's word become flesh, God's intention become consciousness, not metaphorically, physically, through the mechanism we have described. Through the vacuum fluctuations and zero-point energy and quantum fields that sustain your existence at every moment, you are continuous creation happening now. God's ongoing act if God exists, or the vacuum's ongoing act if it does not. Either way continuous, either way creative, either way the most remarkable thing in the universe, that nothing produces something, that void produces mind, that emptiness produces wonder. And consider what this means for how you live, not just what it means intellectually, not just what it means scientifically, but what it means existentially for you, right now, reading these words. If the vacuum sustains you continuously, if your existence is not past event but present creation, if you are being made right now from nothing at every moment, then you are not old, not accumulated history, not the sum of your past. You are new, fresh, created this instant from the same creative void that made the first particles 13.8 billion years ago. The same mechanism, the same power, the same nothing becoming the same something. Your creation is not ancient, it is now. The vacuum that made the universe is making you. Not made, making. Present tense, continuous, ongoing. You are as new as the newest virtual particle, as fresh as the latest vacuum fluctuation, as recently created as anything can be, because creation never stopped, because the vacuum never rests, because nothing never ceases to produce something, including you, especially you, the most complex thing nothing has ever produced, a conscious being contemplating the nothing that created it. The ancient texts all say something similar. The Quran says he is the first and the last, the manifest and the hidden, before everything, after everything, visible in everything, hidden beneath everything. The quantum vacuum is before matter, after matter, manifest as matter, hidden beneath matter. Structural parallel, not proof but parallel. The Upanishads say Brahman is the one without a second, the ground of all being, not a thing among things but the being of things, the existence that makes existence possible. The vacuum is not a thing among things, it is the ground from which all things emerge. Not a particle but what makes particles possible, not energy but what makes energy possible. The Torah says I am that I am, existence itself, not an existent being but existence as such, the ground, the source, the isness beneath all that is. And the vacuum is the physical embodiment of isness, the state that simply is, that exists without being created, that creates without being caused, that persists without being sustained by anything other than its own nature. The vacuum simply is, and from its isness, everything emerges. Are these parallels coincidence? Are they humans projecting meaning onto meaningless physics? Are they the pattern-seeking brain finding patterns where none exist? Perhaps. Probably. The human mind finds meaning everywhere, sees faces in clouds, hears voices in static, finds God in equations. This is what brains do. Filter, signal from noise. And sometimes the noise is just noise. Sometimes the parallel is just parallel. Sometimes physics is just physics, and theology is just theology, and the apparent convergence is accident of language, not depth of reality. But perhaps not. Perhaps the convergence is real. Perhaps the oldest intuitions about creation and the newest discoveries about the vacuum point to the same truth. That reality is fundamentally creative. That existence is not accident, but expression. That the void is not empty, but full. That nothing is not the absence of everything, but the potential for everything. That creation from nothing is not miracle, but the deepest nature of what is real. And that understanding this changes not just physics, but everything. Changes how we understand our existence. Changes how we relate to reality. Changes how we face the mystery that we exist at all. The vacuum creates. This is the one certain thing. The one fact confirmed beyond all doubt. Measured to 12 decimal places. Tested in 1,000 experiments. The creative nothing, the productive void, the overflowing emptiness, is the foundation of all we know and all we are, whether it is God or ground state, whether it is divine or mathematical, whether it is personal or impersonal, whether it is intentional or automatic. It creates, it sustains, it produces reality from non-existence at every point in space, at every moment in time, including this moment, including you, including the consciousness reading these words and wondering what it all means. What it means we do not know. What the vacuum is at its deepest level we cannot say. Whether creation requires a creator remains open. Whether the void has a voice. Whether nothing chose to become something. Whether the equations describe mind or mechanism or both. These questions remain, perhaps forever. Perhaps until some breakthrough we cannot yet imagine reveals the answer. Perhaps until consciousness understands itself well enough to understand its own origin. Perhaps until the universe, the vacuum, the creative, nothing explains itself through creatures it created for this purpose. Or perhaps not. Perhaps there is no answer. Perhaps the question is the answer. Perhaps the asking is the point. Perhaps the vacuum created consciousness so that nothing could wonder why it creates. Perhaps the purpose of existence is the contemplation of existence. Perhaps we are here to ask why we are here, and the asking itself is enough. The wonder is enough. The mystery is enough. Not because we should stop seeking, but because seeking is what consciousness does, what the vacuum made consciousness to do, what nothing created something to accomplish. The asking of why, the contemplation of how, the wonder at the fact that anything exists at all. The vacuum creates from nothing. You are proof. You are the vacuum's evidence that nothing can become everything. That void can become conscious. That emptiness can overflow until it produces minds that recognize the emptiness and marvel at the overflowing. And here is the final thought. The thought that should keep you awake, that should follow you when you close this video and return to ordinary life. The nothing between your atoms is the same nothing that created the universe. The same creative vacuum, the same quantum fields, the same zero-point energy, the same fluctuations. You do not merely exist within the creative void. You are made of it, permeated by it, sustained by it. The void runs through you like blood through veins. Every space between every atom in your body is the same creative nothing that produced the first matter after the Big Bang. The same nothing that fluctuated into the seeds of galaxies. The same nothing that fine-tuned itself or was fine-tuned to permit your existence. You carry the creative void within you. You are the void carrying itself, aware of itself, asking about itself. And when you look at what you call empty space, when you look at the gap between your hand and this screen, when you see nothing, remember that nothing is full, that emptiness is creative, that the void produces everything, including your ability to look at it and call it void. Remember that you are wrong about nothing, that nothing is the most extraordinary something in all of physics. That creation from nothing is not ancient miracle but present fact, that the void is speaking right now, producing reality from non-existence at every point in space, and that you, conscious, aware, wondering, are what the void says when it speaks. This is what we have learned. This is what physics teaches. This is what the quantum vacuum reveals about reality and about ourselves, and about the deepest question any conscious being can ask. Why is there something rather than nothing? We do not know. But we know this. There is something. It came from nothing. And nothing is far stranger and far more creative and far more beautiful than anyone imagined. Until physics looked closely at the void and found it was not void at all, but was the most full, most active, most creative, most mysterious thing in the universe. And perhaps that mystery at the heart of nothing is what theology has always called God, and perhaps it is not. And perhaps the question itself is the only honest answer we will ever have, and perhaps that is enough.